My body was so slick with sweat, it felt as if I'd been plunged into a heavy vat of greasy soup. My physical state, utterly wretched from a lack of washing since the day I arrived, is beyond the power of words to describe. I managed to scavenge a bit of water from the sheep's trough to splash on my face and hands, yet the sense of being rancid persisted, particularly in my armpits and between my legs. I sprawled out on the bare floor beside El Buhali's bed. I remained wide awake, even though every fiber of my being was leaden with exhaustion. It was expected that I would dwell on my homeland, my family, my sorrows, and the cruel hand of fate that tossed me here. But those thoughts never materialized. It was as if I had been severed from the world of the living and ushered into the afterlife. You might wonder how this man surrendered so effortlessly, how he waved the white flag so soon. It happened with a terrifying speed. The past became a stranger to the world I now inhabit. The dagger of destiny was pressed against my throat, my head bowed low, my face shoved against the hard floor of this black misery. I had to adapt. It was the only means of survival. If I continued to inhabit the past, I would lose my mind and drown in my own agony. Perhaps this is how those who came before me endured. What do you think? Can you guess what was actually occupying my mind?
I was obsessing over how to milk the goats like El Buhali, how to herd the entire flock in the pen by myself, what I needed to watch for, and the mistakes I made today so I could avoid them at dawn. I felt no regret for yesterday and saw no glimmer of hope for tomorrow. My mind was entirely consumed by the labor that awaited the rising sun. I brooded over these details until I finally slipped into a fitful sleep despite the pain. I glanced at the bed and found El Buhali gone. I assumed he had started work early. I hurried to the pen, fearing I was late for the milking, but he wasn't there either. Contrary to his routine, he hadn't moved the sheep to the pasture, nor had he laid out their feed or barley. I searched every corner of the pens. Nothing. I returned to his bedside to see if his old suitcase was still in its place. It was gone. Suspicion began to root faster. Just then, the patron emerged from his tent, thrust a bucket toward me, and barked at me to get to the milking. I gave him a look that demanded to know El Buhali's whereabouts. He spat out a single sentence thick with vitriol, exhaustion, and malice. From his words, I grasped only one thing. Our companion, El Buhali, had fled this black hell. I had only known the man for 2 days, and I don't even know what to call our acquaintance. We shared few words. I knew neither his name nor his origin, yet his absence left me devastated. I don't know why, perhaps because I suddenly felt utterly solitary in this calamity. My legs could no longer support me. I felt the visceral shock one feels when told a parent has died. To the patron, however, it was a matter of indifference. Where El Buhali fled, how, or with whom, he didn't care to know. If he heard I had escaped one day, his reaction would be identical. A hard, logical assessment of the situation. If El Buhali is gone, there is Najib. If Najib is gone, there will always be someone else. I hadn't realized the patron would be this cold. His behavior from day one had been ruthless. He would fire shots into the sky and flaunt the binoculars he used to monitor us from afar. He would circle us in his car when we took the flock out, hovering like a hawk if we strayed too far. It was clear he would never let us leave this hell. And I realized then that El Buhali had been trying to warn me. Don't you ever try to run. If he catches you, he will kill you. He has no mercy in his heart. And yet there he was, gone, leaving me behind with that liar. He wanted to leave his burden behind for me. That's why he had been training me. Now the patron is calm, and the man who escaped is gone for good. In spite of everything, I felt a spark of joy for 3 reasons. First, that El Buhali was finally liberated from this suffering. Second, the realization that I too might escape one day. And third, The most immediate triumph was that Elbow Holly's bed was now mine. I would no longer have to break my back on the cold floor.
The morning I woke up, I found Bawali had escaped. His flight motivated me. The mere idea that I too could one day vanish from this place gave me a surge of energy. I headed to the pen to milk the goats with a newfound spirit. I was still clearly lacking experience, but I was better than the day before. The number of kicks I took was beginning to dwindle. I managed to walk out of that stable having actually produced some milk, which felt like a miracle. But if I told you I had reached Bawali's level, I'd be lying. That man was a master. He was leagues ahead of me in the milking arena.
As usual, I gave the patron his share and fed the young lambs, the ones they separate from their mothers, their portion. Now, the weight of the work that was previously split between two men fell entirely on my shoulders. I let the camels out to graze after feeding them, hauled hay, barley, and grain into the pens, and filled the water troughs. When the water truck arrived, I helped the driver refill the reservoir, and when the hay truck came, I unloaded everything myself. My back felt like it was snapping in two, yet the work was endless. It was time to take the sheep out to graze, but I hadn't even finished half the feeding. The patron began cursing me out because I was late. Even though he was watching me from his tent, seeing me toil without a second's rest, he didn't care. I told him, "I'm alone. I don't have 4 hands." I don't know if he understood my words, but he understood my defiance. His response was to unbuckle his belt and lash my back until I doubled over. That was a response that required no translation. He walked away, muttering insults. I gathered one thing from his rambling, that this job was handled by one man until I arrived 2 days ago. Sometimes, even if you don't speak the language, the message is crystal clear.
I went back to work with tears in my eyes. There was no time to rest for breakfast, and the patron certainly didn't invite me. As soon as I finished grazing 2 pens worth of sheep, he called me over. A truck had arrived to take the livestock to market. My job was to catch the fattest ones and load them. The big patron was driving the truck, and there was no one to help me. I went into the pen while the 2 patrons stood outside, pointing fingers. "That one! No, that one!" I'd try to grab one, and it would slip through my fingers like a fish, vanishing back into the herd. I wrestled with them, chasing them down until I caught them by sheer force. The real nightmare was getting them into the truck. The sheep were stubborn. They wouldn't go up on their own. I had to push each one with every ounce of strength I had left. The process was long and soul-crushing. I felt faint after loading just 3 rams, but the patrons kept barking orders. "Get this one! No, not that one! The other one!" I was running, catching, releasing, until I found the specific fat one they wanted. I loaded about 20 head this way. Finally, I collapsed to the ground, completely spent. I began to curse myself and everyone around me. Bawali escaped, and I was left to carry the entire burden. I was beaten down by back-breaking labor, and I didn't even taste a morsel of food until afternoon. I was learning to face life alone, doing a strange job I had never done before, adapting to a chaotic new existence. It wasn't about being a hero. You were forced into it. The equation here is simple. You work until your bones crumble if you want a sip of water. What would you do in my place? A man will work himself to death for the sake of water. As the days passed, I began to learn the intricacies of the camels' numbers and the lives of the sheep. About a week after I arrived, I was out grazing the flock. There was a pregnant goat that looked exhausted. I asked the patron if I should take her out with the rest. He nodded. Halfway through the trek, she veered away from the herd and collapsed on the ground. I stood over her, bewildered. She began to writhe and groan. I realized her time had come. I tried to lead her back to the pen, but she failed. Every 3 or 4 steps, she'd collapse again. Meanwhile, the herd was far ahead and starting to scatter, 50 head going in every direction, while this one was lying in the dirt trying to give birth. I was paralyzed, torn between following the herd or staying with the goat.
In the end, I chose to stay. I remembered the old proverb about the shepherd who went looking for one lost sheep and left 49 behind. I had never witnessed an animal give birth before. I had no idea what to do. I just stood there watching until the head began to crown. I was terrified. As it emerged slowly, I found myself reaching down instinctively to catch it so it wouldn't hit the ground. But before I could get a grip, it slipped through my hands, slick with birth fluids. I started cleaning the newborn, but its mother was faster. She cleaned its body and licked it dry. The little kid tried to stand on its legs and succeeded. It moved toward its mother's udder, and that's when I saw it was a male. In that moment, my mind flew straight back home. I thought of my wife, who was pregnant and could give birth at any moment. I took this as a sign from God. I decided to name the kid Nabil, the name I had chosen for my own son.
My hands and clothes were covered in blood, and there was nowhere to wash. If I returned to the pen without the sheep, the patron would skin me alive. I wiped my hands on the dry patches of my clothes and guided Nabil to his mother's udder. Suddenly, something struck me with such force it sent me reeling. I blacked out for a moment, and when I came to, I realized I hadn't been hit by a ghost. It was a well-aimed rock thrown by the patron. He was glaring at me with pure rage, screaming and pointing into the distance. I looked where he was pointing and saw the sheep scattered across the desert dunes. The patron walked over to Nabil, kicked him away from the other, and headed back to the pen, carrying the kid over his shoulder, ignoring the mother's pleading gaze. I ran after the sheep, leaving the mother behind. It took me until I was breathless to round them all up. When we returned, the mother goat followed us in. The patron was waiting for me with gifts. By gifts, I mean a barrage of blows and a litany of insults. He accused me of 4 things: attempting to steal water to wash the blood off my hands, delaying the herd's return, wasting time watching a goat give birth, and the gravest offense, trying to let the kid nurse from his mother. I knew they kept the young ones away from the mothers here, putting them in a separate pen and bottle feeding them bucket milk. He didn't understand it. In those first moments after birth, they don't know any better. I tried to help a goat give birth, and my reward was a bouquet of abuse: the belt, no lunch, kicks, and being spat upon. Yet, despite all this, I wasn't sad. I was certain that God would reward my patience and protect the family I left behind. I clung to this thought. Without it, God knows what state I'd be in. I grew fond of Nabil and cared for him more than any other animal in the pen. He didn't really need it, but I couldn't help myself. He was born in my arms, a gift from God in place of my son. Sometimes I'd sneak him a drink from his mother when the patron wasn't looking, a privilege no other lamb had. While the others drank from a common bucket, Nabil got his milk straight from the source. I picked the softest feed for him, and during grazing, I never let him out of my sight. He was mischievous, always jumping around, and when I tried to catch him, he'd slip away and hide in the herd. I'd chase him down just to kiss him. To me, he wasn't one of hundreds, he was my son. Even as a kid, he was bold, head-butting rams much larger than him. Some would play along, but others would gore him without mercy. Many times he came back to me bleeding. I'd steal water from the trough to wash his wounds and apply a medicine I had borrowed from the patron. One morning, as I was preparing to take the flock out, the patron told me, "Don't take them today. You have other work." He went to the tent and brought out a large, sharpened knife. I felt a fire ignite inside me. Was this bastard going to goat for a feast? In this place, the patron asks questions but is never questioned. His word is hear and obey, whether you understand it or not. That's the system. I followed him silently. He went to the pen where the young rams were. He pointed to one and said, "Catch this one." I thought he was going to end him. I didn't want to, but I was forced. I caught the ram and he showed me how to hold it between my thighs, lifting its back legs so its front legs stayed on the ground. This allowed the patron to see what was underneath. The ram was trembling with fear, and I was shaking even harder. I remember the patron approaching, checking the edge of the knife. Suddenly, I heard a scream, a sound I have never heard before. Blood began to spray like a faucet. The ram writhed in my grip, kicking with all its might. I was terrified it would break free, but my fear of the patron outweighed the ram's strength. The patron pulled out a spray and doused the wound. The ram's scream sounded like its soul was departing. The bleeding stopped, and the ram eventually went limp from shock.
The patron gestured for me to release it. It ran back into the pen like a wild animal that had been shot. The patron had castrated him. He cut off his testicles and threw them on the ground like they were just scraps of meat. I noticed he didn't let all the rams grow up whole. He hand-picked some to remain intact for breeding later, but the rest were castrated. Their ultimate destiny was the house. I had already noticed that the castrated ones grew faster, but I never knew it happened in such a brutal way. The patron pointed to another, and I brought him. He knew exactly how old each one was and when they were due. Usually, it was in the first or second month. From a single glance, he knew if a ram would produce good offspring or if it was better suited for meat. I kept bringing them to him, and he castrated them with the coldness of a man clipping his fingernails.
After 5 or 6, he pointed to one, and I felt my heart stop. If you've been paying attention, you know why. He pointed at Nabil. I wanted Nabil to grow up happy and peaceful here. No, I won't let you put him under that knife. I ignored the patron's gesture and pushed Nabil back into the herd, grabbing another ram instead. But the patron had the eyes of an eagle. Even when he sat lazily in his tent, he could distinguish his sheep like the lines on his palm. He pointed at Nabil again. I couldn't do it. I didn't want him to suffer. I grabbed the leg of another ram nearby. The patron roared, "He marred!" His patience snapped. He kicked me hard in the back. I know you want Nabil, but no. Despite the pain, I grabbed another ram. The patron charged at me, kicking me so hard I flew backward onto the ground. He grabbed Nabil by the leg and dragged him, fuming with rage. I scrambled up and fell at his feet, begging, "Please leave him. He's special to me. I don't want him sent to the house. Let him stay here with me." The patron struck me across the head, dragged Nabil over, and barked, "Hold his legs." A heavy silence, then a very quiet, grave delivery. In the blink of an eye, Nabil's testicles were lying in the dirt, bloody like the others. The scream Nabil let out that day, I can still feel the echo of it in my heart. It felt like a piece of glass had been driven into my chest. I don't remember anything after that, except Nabil running back to the pen, whimpering. When I woke up, I was lying on a bale of hay. The patron gave me a little water. The sun was scorching, and told me to get to work. Grazing is sometimes easy, and sometimes it's chaos. Once I struck a ram from behind to move the flock. He turned around like a raging elephant, snorting steam from his nostrils. He charged and headbutted me right in the chest. I couldn't move. It felt like my ribs had been hit by a 1,000-ton hammer. I was tossed 10 meters through the air, like a scene from an old Indian action movie, and I blacked out.
I don't know how long I lay there. When I opened my eyes, the patron was sitting in front of me. He poured hot water on my face and started cursing me. I struggled to stand. I looked out at the desert. The sheep were scattered across 5 kilometers. My left arm was swollen and throbbing with agony. I told the patron, "I think my arm is broken." Who was going to listen? He pulled out his belt, gestured with it, and screamed at me to go gather the sheep. If I lost even one, it would be my last day on earth. I ran through the desert, cradling my broken arm with the other. The sheep were reveling in their freedom, their wild nature coming out like a nation suddenly revolting against slavery. It was total chaos. As soon as I caught one, another would bolt. I realized I couldn't bring them back as one flock. I started gathering small groups, locking them in the pen, and going back for more. The distance between the pen and the furthest sheep was about 2 kilometers. I went back and forth, over and over. My body was failing. I was afraid my soul would literally depart from my flesh. And imagine this, when I stopped for a brief second to take a sip of water, the patron snatched the cup and threw it. He started hitting me to make me go back for the rest. I ran until my tongue hung out, my throat parched. I looked to the sky and complained of my burden to the Almighty. The sheep were far. The thirst was unbearable. My feet were swollen, and my arm was shattered. I ran, my voice rising in screams and sobs. There wasn't a breath of wind. The sky held nothing but a sun-breathing fire.
I didn't finish bringing them all in until afternoon. Honestly, I wonder how I stayed alive in those conditions without rest or a drop of water. 2 things kept me going: the will to live despite the hardship and my limitless faith in God. When the last sheep was in, I collapsed on my bed, faint. The patron came over and poured a little water into my mouth. I began to tell him to take me, and then his voice faded, not because he stopped talking, but because I slipped back into unconsciousness. When I came to, darkness had fallen. My arm was unnaturally swollen. The pain was beyond my endurance. I was certain it was a break. Plus, my chest ached from the ram's headbutt. I stood up with great difficulty and stumbled to get a drink. Then I went to the patron's tent, carrying my pain. He threw me 3 loaves of bread and scolded me for being out for so long. I was so hungry I devoured the bread after dipping it in water. I couldn't sleep that night. I went to the tent several times, crying and begging him to take me to the hospital. My pleas fell on deaf ears.
The next morning, he woke me up with a bucket in his hand. "Get up and milk." I showed him my deformed arm. His only answer was a slap to the head. Broken, shattered, and in agony, I walked like a drunkard to the pen. How was I supposed to milk with one hand? Yet, many times, I found more kindness in the animals than in humans. I felt them sympathizing with me. One goat stood perfectly still and calm until I finished milking her. I placed the bucket in front of the patron's tent, cursing him in my head. "Drink it, you pig, until you burst." After he guzzled the milk, he told me to go milk for the lambs. At that moment, my strength was gone. I found myself shouting, "I can't! I can't!" He was shocked by this new tone. I went to my bed and threw myself down on my stomach, waiting for the lash of his belt. Would he kill me? Let him. It would be a mercy. What does a man have to fear if he's ready to meet death? I had made a pact with God not to take my own life, but if I let this patron kill me, I hoped the Lord wouldn't hold it against me.
Surprisingly, he didn't come for me. The sheep's schedule was messed up that day, and I didn't care. I lay there resting. I was truly spent to the bone. Later, the big patron arrived in his car. He spoke with the man in the tent, then came to me. He grabbed my arm, touching the swelling. I screamed, begging him to take me to a hospital. He ignored me. He went to his car and brought some herbs. He crushed them in a bowl and applied them to my arm. He tied some sticks around it with a rag. I showed him my chest, and he smeared the herbs there too. I kept begging for a hospital. I didn't trust his medicine. I was afraid my arm would rot and need amputation. He gave me bread, which I ate quickly after soaking it in water, and told me, "Take the sheep out, you're late." I couldn't say no. I dragged myself to the pen, cradling my broken arm. By the time darkness fell that day, the pain in my arm had dulled. 2 days later, the swelling in my arm and chest subsided. After 10 days, I removed the rag.
I want to tell you something I haven't mentioned before. Would you believe me if I told you that as a child, my dream was to be a shepherd? Maybe that dream came from a movie called Ramanan, based on a famous folk poem. My mother loved it. I used to imagine wandering from land to land, enjoying the scenery with my flock in the valleys and hills, camping in a new place every night, sitting by a fire on cold nights. Being a shepherd was a dream I had romanticized. Now, in reality, I was a shepherd, and only now did I see the vast chasm between my dreams and the truth. We shouldn't dream of things that only look beautiful from a distance. When they come true in reality, the shock can be devastating. One of the hardest things I struggled with was the crushing monotony. The highlights of the month were the barley truck once a month, the hay truck once a week, and the water truck twice a week. These trucks were the only link between my planet and the outside universe. The drivers were all Pakistani. I thought if I could just communicate with them, I could get my voice out to the world. At least they'd know I was alive. Maybe through them I could escape one day. I kept a small flicker of hope hidden in a corner of my mind. But the patron always ruined my calculations. He'd send me out early to graze on the days the trucks were due and forbid me from returning until they were gone. He didn't even let me help them fill the reservoir or unload the feed anymore. One day, a truck arrived without workers to unload it. The patron was forced to call me back from the dunes to do the task. The driver was Pakistani. It had been so long since I'd seen another human being. Imagine this. Because of how much the patrons and I stank, the scent of that Pakistani driver's sweat smelled like the finest perfume to me. I couldn't contain my joy. I touched his hand and felt a shiver. As we unloaded the truck, I tried to convey my situation using every form of expression I had. I begged him with my eyes to save me from this hell, but he ignored me. I looked at him with pure desperation. Every time he tossed a bale of hay onto my shoulder, I gestured and walked close to him. I even went so far as to fall at his feet. I dropped a bale on purpose and knelt by his legs. But the Pakistani driver didn't even grant me a single look of pity. Only I know how my heart shattered in that moment. When we finished, he started his engine and drove away without even a smile. My hope was extinguished. I cursed that man with words I'm ashamed to repeat here. I doubt anyone has ever insulted a stranger as intensely as I did then. I hated him. I beat my chest to calm the rage. I went back to gather the sheep I had left wandering. Later, I understood why he couldn't help me. He had known my patron for a long time. He knew the reaction would be lethal if the patron caught him talking to me. Once, a barley truck driver tried to speak to me, and the patron came running with his rifle. I still remember the water truck driver who spoke to me. The patron hit him with the butt of his rifle and laid him out on the ground. God knows how many people like me had been imprisoned in this pen. Maybe that Pakistani driver had tried to help someone before and been beaten for it. Maybe he was sitting in his truck now, crying for having left me there. That's how I convinced myself it wasn't by choice. With God's strength, I endured the pain. One day, I was overcome by the urge to write a letter to my wife, Sainu. I didn't think about how I'd send it. After lunch, I took a pen and paper from my bag. My pen barely worked. This was my first letter. I didn't know how to start, but I poured my heart into it. My beloved Sainu, I arrived safely. I couldn't send word because I've been busy. I know you're worried, but there's no need. I am well. I'm working for a wool and milk company. The work is easy, no manual labor. The machines do everything. The patron likes me and always gives me gifts. The housing is luxurious, and the views from my bed are incredible. The food is varied and delicious. I've never tasted anything like it. My health is good. I've even gained a little weight. I hope this letter finds you and my mother in good health. I'll write again when I have time. Your beloved Najib. I folded the paper and wept with my eyes closed. The truth wasn't in the letter. It was in my tears, and no one could read the truth.
One day, while grazing, the sky grew heavy with dark clouds. The wind hit me so cold I felt like I was at the South Pole, not the desert. I gathered the flock and rushed back. As I arrived, the rain began to drizzle. The first drop that touched me made me writhe as if I'd been stabbed. This was the first time a drop of water had touched my skin in 10 months. It was a violent sensation. As the rain intensified, every drop felt like a needle. I couldn't bear the pain and wrapped myself in a cloth for protection. The rain brought thunder and lightning. I was afraid a bolt would hit the pen and incinerate us. Every time a drop hit my head, my hair stood on end and I trembled. I envied anyone who could enjoy a shower in the rain, but for me, the pain was too much.
When I couldn't take it anymore, I headed for the patron's tent. I found him huddled in the corner, terrified. I bet his brain hadn't seen a drop of water since the day he was born. For the first time, he welcomed me into his tent. He made me sit on the bed when I tried to sit on the floor. He grabbed my hand like a scared child and crawled under the blanket. In that position, my hand brushed against the rifle under the pillow. I pulled it out slowly. The patron was lost in prayer, oblivious. Survival instinct flared. The idea hit me: shoot ahead and run. The car was outside. I could follow the tracks until I hit the highway. This was the chance God had given me. I wouldn't waste it. I was a second away from pulling the trigger and ending him.
Then I heard him praying, "Oh God, save me. If it weren't for Najib, I would have died." This was the first time I had heard him say my name. I thought he didn't know it, since he only ever called me donkey or Indian. That prayer softened my heart. I couldn't run away after killing a man who was, in that moment, a pathetic coward in need of help. I put the weapon back. The tent felt stifling. I cast off my wet clothes and walked out into the rain naked. I endured the sting of the droplets until the pain faded. I began to enjoy every drop. I ran in the rain. It washed me after so long. The layers of filth and misery were stripped away. When the rain let up, the patron drove off in his car and didn't return that night. I felt free with no one watching me. I knew I had to do something I'd never done before. I decided to go to the other pen, which wasn't far. I hoped to find Hakim, whom I hadn't seen since the night the patron dropped him there. I didn't know if he was still alive, if he died from abuse, or if he'd escaped. That poor boy felt so far away, even though the distance was small in this narrow prison where they'd thrown us.
I went to the nearby pen and knocked. I was afraid of Hakim's patron, but I kept knocking. "Hakim, can you hear me? It's Najib, the one who came with you to the Gulf. Are you there?" When there was no answer, I was about to leave. Then I saw a shadow moving in the distance. I shouted, "Hakim, is that you? It's Najib!" The rain was falling, and I feared the noise would drown out my voice. The shadow approached. When he reached me, I looked at him closely. He looked like a derelict, disfigured, skeletal, filthy, with long matted hair. This wasn't Hakim. Hakim was a handsome young boy who took care of himself. I had even advised him to stay in Bombay and try his luck in Indian movies. Please, is there anyone here named Hakim? I'm his friend. We came from the same country together. I haven't seen him. Do you know where he is? The man stood behind the gate, staring at me. Suddenly, he began banging his head against the gate and screaming. Amidst his screams, I heard him call my name in a voice that would break your heart. Believe me, brothers, in that moment, I realized this was Hakim. I discovered that circumstances can redraw a person's map so completely that you can no longer recognize them. I imagined my own self was just as disfigured. I hadn't seen a mirror since I set foot in the desert. If I saw my reflection, I wouldn't know who I was. Hakim wept, prayed, and called out for his parents. I had no answers for him. All I could do was share his tears, gripping his hands through the iron bars.
When winter arrives, the days grew short. The work I did in 15 hours during the summer had to be squeezed into 6 or 7. The cold was vicious. It seeped into my very spine. I couldn't put my hands in the water trough. I discovered that freezing water can burn skin just like boiling water. One day, my left hand was covered in blisters as if it had been scalded. I didn't have winter clothes to fight the cold. I eventually found warmth in the sheep. When the cold became unbearable, I'd go into the pen and huddle with the lambs to sleep. I spent those harsh winter nights like a sheep among the flock. The fog made me think of escape again. Let's run, Hakim and I, while the weather is chaotic and no one can see. But the million-dollar question, where would we run to? Until I found the answer, I would stay put until God showed mercy. When the winter days ended, the pen became foul. A new stench arose. The urine and dung of the animals mixed with wet hay and feed. It took me 4 days of back-breaking work to clean it. Then the flies attacked. Flies everywhere. If I sat down to eat a piece of bread, a swarm would descend. I had to wave my left hand like a fan just to get a bite in with my right. Evil, hateful flies. But then I'd calm down and think, even they deserve to live. Maybe this pen is the best place for them. Let them be.
I feared the rams and I hated them. At any moment, one could gore you and leave a permanent mark. But one day, one of them saved my life. I was grazing as usual. I climbed a dune to rest and let the sheep wander. Memories of home and family flooded back. A volcano of longing erupted inside me. The patron was on top of his car with binoculars, but I was on the other side of the dune, out of his sight. This was my chance. I stood up, didn't think twice, and ran like the wind. Unfortunately, a ram followed me, running by my side. I tried to drive him off with my stick, but he stayed glued to me. I didn't look back. I wanted to be saved, so I just looked ahead and ran. Don't ask where I was going. I was just running to survive. The ram was still with me, nearly tripping me several times. The fear of a bad fall made me run even faster. Suddenly, I heard the roar of a car engine behind me. Oh God, the patron must have seen me. He chased me until there was only a meter between us, and I heard the crack of a gunshot. It didn't hit me, and I knew the attempt had failed, but I doubled my speed. At the sound of the second shot, the ram running beside me slammed into me with a horrific cry. He fell to the ground, and I fell under him. Blood sprayed from his chest like a fountain. He writhed in agony, then stood up, walked a short distance, and collapsed. The patron reached me. It was over. I fell at his feet, begging for forgiveness. He unbuckled his belt and began to beat me. I screamed, and he barked, "Get in the car!" I scrambled into the back like a wounded pup, tail between its legs.
The ram was dead. The patron threw the carcass next to me. Its eyes were still open. It died for me, and the tears wouldn't stop. "You unlucky ram! Who told you to follow me? Why did you take the bullet meant for me?" I was wrong to think it was time to escape. The car stopped at the pen. The patron dragged me inside, tied me up, and beat me until he was satisfied and I was bleeding. I didn't cry. My body endured the blows because of the ram that had sacrificed its soul for mine. The patron skinned the ram quickly, grilled some pieces, and ate his fill. He offered me the scraps. I didn't want a single bite. He hit me and forced a piece of meat into my mouth. I felt like I was being forced to eat the flesh of a family member. I couldn't swallow it. Everything I ate, I vomited up instantly. Since that day, I have never eaten lamb or goat, and I never will. I stayed tied in the pen for 2 days. No water, no bread. My only consolation was that the ram had died for me. On the second night, overcome by hunger, I made sure the patron was asleep and untied myself. I crawled through the sheep to the trough. I drank until my thirst was quenched, but hunger was gnawing at me. I found grains of barley scattered on the ground, left behind by the sheep. I gathered them in my hand and ate them without a second thought. When I was full, I felt at peace and slept among the sheep. What do you think? Had I become one of them? That's exactly how it felt to me.
One day, I entered the pen and found 4 sheep dead. Just yesterday, they were running around, perfectly fine. I didn't understand. Was it a disease? Panicked, I ran to the patron's tent. I told him in my broken way, "Sheep dead, come see." He came and inspected them. I expected him to blame me and beat me, but he didn't. He walked around the pen, gave me a shovel, and said, "Dig here." When I finished, he personally dragged the carcasses and buried them. I was shocked. My patron worshipped money, yet here he was, burying valuable livestock. I didn't understand his secret. That night, after I ate, the patron did something unusual. He started his car. I hoped he would go spend the night elsewhere so I could feel free, but he didn't. He drove around the pen and then went back into his tent. I don't know why he was so restless. I eventually fell asleep, but was woken in the night by the sound of the sheep panicking. I opened my eyes to find the patron running by the fence, shouting. I scrambled up and ran to him. He shoved a stick into my hand and pushed me inside the pen. I stood there, stunned.
The patron pulled his car up to the pen and turned on the high beams. "Look, there it is!" he shouted. The sheep were still jumping in terror. I pushed them aside and saw it. A snake was coiled around the leg of a ram. I screamed in terror and backed out of the pen. The patron grew furious, shoved me back inside and locked the gate. I had 2 choices, kill the snake or let it kill me and the sheep. Necessity forces a man to do things he never imagined. I had dreams to achieve. I had to be brave if I wanted to stay in this life. I crept through the sheep and struck the leg of the ram where the snake was coiled. The blow landed near it. The snake released its grip and came straight for me, hissing. I tried to run, but the gate was locked. I was like a madman, swinging the stick left and right. Many blows hit the sheep, who was screaming and jumping. The snake escaped. I don't think I even hit it. The patron cursed me, and that ram died on the spot. Peace was gone that night. I no longer slept on the sand to stay cool. The next morning, we found 3 more carcasses in the pen for the young ones. Among them was my little Nabil, the one who was born in my arms, the one I considered my son. I'll stop this part here. Next week will be the final part, the story of how I finally got out of there. I hope this finds you well. That is all, my brothers. Take care.